You know what I mean? Because they use the predictive policing thing to say that, oh, we're doing this to monitor like they say that they use predictive policing to monitor the communities, but more than anything, what I've seen firsthand is they use it to harass people. You know what I mean? They use it to harass people when they're in low positions. Like I had helicopters above my head, literally just boom, just like nonstop, and to just pushing me. You know what I mean? Just a whole bunch of harassment. I get people hacking into my phone. Like I like for real, I have videos of that where like I'm writing books and I'm writing scripts, and that just gets, the whole thing has just been intense, man. It's been intense.
Thank you for sharing that, Doug. Thank you. Then there's a question well, maybe Nick, if you want to go ahead and make a comment so it's easier, so coming directly to your voice, go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead.
Can you hear me okay, Hamid?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so, you know, Brendan McQuaid, he's written a lot about mass supervision and basically this kind of concept of the kind of decarceration that's happened over the past decade or so. And the way the state has responded to that has been through a kind of punitive manner, which is basically bringing mass supervision to basically communities like Camden and other communities like depressed communities throughout the country. So I was wondering what your thoughts are between mass supervision and or surveillance, hyper surveillance, and decarceration. What I mean, would you agree with him? Would you expand upon that? What are your thoughts on that? I guess that's my question.
I mean, I would definitely agree with him. I think I also feel very cautioned where people start speaking about the Camden model in New Jersey, because I think that is being presented as an alternative. And I think we have to very seriously investigate what that Camden model is, because in a sense, like, you know, what is happening is, and this is what Brandon also lifts as well, that how these virtual carceral states are being created. You know, in a sense, like, so what are the various ways, of course, like the tracking, and it's almost like, you know, what we are right now seeing unfold as reform right here in our neighborhoods, like under the guise of community safety partnerships. That how, you know, just as a smaller sort of a model of Camden, when you look at Jordan Downs and when you look at other places, these have become laboratories for control, in a sense where not only there's a virtual following, because going back 2006, 2007, where Motorola, and when Bill Bratton was the chief and he was also on the board of Motorola later, Motorola got a huge contract for installing CCTVs, closed circuit televisions in Jordan Downs. And then they advanced and added license plate readers in there as well. They have all, within Jordan Downs, this community safety partnership, also there's another process of policing, and Nick, you've also written about it, like that crime prevention through environmental design, where they go and clear out green spaces in neighborhoods as well to make it more accessible for surveillance, almost like a whole panopticon. So sometimes when people talk about Skid Row and South Central Los Angeles and other communities, like, you know, where are the green spaces? Well, there's a reason why there are no green spaces, that how, you know, these things are reached. So I think this sort of what you're talking about, both through the lens of social control and of course pacification, of course always making themselves present, it goes a long way. So thank you for raising that. Anybody else in the audience wants to address that in our communities? Don, did you raise your hand or? Okay. Okay. Stephen, did you want to say something or were you just clapping? I'm sorry. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Yeah, one of the observations I've gotten is most of my experience recently has been as a legal observer. And one of the observations I got talking to people of color is that this level of surveillance in white communities may be new and intimidating with all those armed forces there, but it's normal in other communities. And so this kind of enlightenment is happening now. I don't know how well it's going to resonate. But as an LO, one of the things I've seen change after George Floyd's murder is the counter protest. And when PD stood down, then all these counter protesters came up. It's much more prevalent in Orange County, but there's evidence of it in LA County. and the insidious way that they do it, on how they try to integrate themselves within the existing protest, or bring in signs that are just a little bit off kilter, and it makes it a real problem. They'll owe it, because it's not a binary anymore. It's not police and activists. It's much more complex. And I think a number of the newer activist groups I've dealt with are not familiar with that level of insidious behavior by the counter-protest, and how they're able to work their way into the protest itself. So it's become a problem, actually, I think.
Thanks.
That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments about, all right, Don, give me 1 second. There you go. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Way to go with the tech control.
I know. Tell me about it.
Hey, everybody. I thought I would hold this closer towards once we got into some of this program. I know that we might touch on some of the different forms of surveillance and all of that used, but I'll go ahead and, which I know nothing about, except for, it's so this particular moment during our movement is interesting to me, having been part of just actions for a long time, usually like more arranged and tightly organized, and with unions it was often also organized with police type stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And then obviously, since our movement, we don't negotiate with any kind of enforcers in those ways. And so, but just I remember there was one huge action that we had near the 405. We shut down the freeway one night, and police stood down. They stood way, way down. And we were out there till like midnight, 1 in the morning. We had been out there all day, and we were expecting them to come in at some time. We were ready, right? And they didn't. And we were like, shit, what are we doing right now? They're not coming in, right? That was one of the first times, this was a couple years ago, that I felt that. And I was reminded of that recently when we had a peace march here in Long Beach. And we were marching about, I think it was 9 miles up from Ocean Boulevard, up Atlantic, all the way to Artesia, to North Long Beach, from the water to the end of the city. And probably about, I don't know how many that was, it built up throughout the march. So maybe like 250 or so people. And though, and it was very mixed. And mind you, this was a peace march right off the heels of some pretty intense violence and Black and brown violence that was going on. Folks were starting these Black and brown talks, and peace talks were going on, peace march this was. So you might expect, and there are a lot of young folks, somebody called me an elder. I was like, who are you talking to? Like, I don't know what's happening. And so you might expect that there would have been a lot of police around, right? Like, they're gonna think that this might incite violence. You were hearing rumors about, putting hits out on certain groups, all this kind of nonsense. And so, anyway, we didn't see people, and suddenly, so two of us were in a car, and we would drive up ahead a little bit and help block traffic, and we noticed the same truck. It was a blue truck, pickup truck, tinted windows, this thing on back. You don't quite catch it at first, right? You just figure it's a truck carrying some load or whatever. And so we saw it a second time. By the third time we looked, and I was like, oh snap. And I nudged my friend over here who's like, hasn't had these conversations at all. And this big machine looked like a submarine head, right? It was like wrapped, it had some wire wrapped around it, but it was pretty well bolted. It was huge. And, we took some pictures of it, we watched it, and it would stay ahead about a mile and a half ahead of, yep. Oh, that's the photo. Yeah. That is the photo. Freedom on the move, as Hamed later taught me that was. And no wonder there were no police around, because this thing right here was monitoring everything. And so, it's like when we think our eyes are deceiving us, in the moment, particularly when we're talking about direct actions in particular, look around for what else might be going on when we're thinking this one thing in the moment is happening that might seem a little off, like no cops showing up. Look around for something else to be happening. There's something else happening. And it was this. And I was just like, I don't know, for me, that was the first time seeing this style surveillance happening, and the facial recognition that it does and the recording of voice that it does. I was just like, wow. So there's a lot. It was a teachable moment in the crowd about looking out for it. I immediately reached out to Hamid and was able to go right back to the crowd to let, to just educate while we were walking. But yeah.
And these are also, if you look at the license plate also, Don, it says California exempt. So
yeah,
there's no marking. It's a private truck. It almost looks like somebody's made this truck and all of that. So yeah, so these are very common themes. And I think that's what we have to really start thinking, that a lot of times we get caught up, and that's why when we talk about abolition, it's about not just about policing uniform, it's about policing, and what does that mean? Because there's so many, it's coming from so many different ways yeah. So I know that I have one last comment before we move on. Amanda, you wanted to, let me just go unmute Amanda. Go ahead, Amanda. You had some comments about Riverside during the uprisings?
Yes, so hi everyone, I'm a UCR graduate student. We participated in the uprisings that were happening in Riverside, and it was very interesting. I had a lot of students and I guess just fellow graduate students and my undergraduate students who had never been to a protest before. We had to have that lovely talk of don't take pictures, like period, because people can be identified even with face masks on. But what was interesting was kind of observing the on-the-ground stuff they were doing in Riverside, which doesn't quite have the same tech as LA and Long Beach. Like, we didn't have any stingrays, but they did create a perimeter. Like, there were no police in the vicinity, but they boxed us in. And then after their curfew, which they kept moving the time of, they actually rolled a tank into downtown Riverside. And there was footage of this on the news. Yeah, there was a tank. So, and they were shooting rubber bullets. Again, you're supposed to bounce those at people, but directly at people. They were tear gassing us, etc. But it is interesting because they didn't have, I think they did have some kind of the false cell phone towers because people's phones were fucking up. But the big thing that we did see was just the low tech that they were using to try to record people's faces. Before things started, when people were gathering, they had ambulances driving through the area with the sirens on, but they had people with cameras pointed out the windows recording you as you looked at the ambulance. So I had to instruct people not to look up at the drones, not to look over at the ambulances. Yeah, it's interesting being with a group of new protesters. I did my best, but like, yeah, it was very interesting, just some of the low tech stuff they were resorting to, and just the military tactics of literally like boxing us in, because the downtown is a very square grid area. And you can actually see where they were setting up. They were using like closed grocery store parking lots to house all their stuff out of sight. And then they actually closed down the freeways surrounding the area, and the tank actually came from like the 91. So we know exactly where they drove it off of, but they closed like 2 stops to set up all their tactical gear there.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's but that sort of leads us into just kind of doing some sort of a 101 and understanding as well, because I think, and as we get started, I would also ask folks that, sometimes we get so much caught up into technology and high tech that the old style human-based intelligence gathering is still one of the most just used tactics. And I think also, Don, to your point about them not showing up and kind of easing off, I think we also have to look at psychological operations and psych wars and psych ops, and there's a whole lot of stuff that is done in this almost like a cat and mouse game, but it's really as a way to wear people down completely, for folks to get tired, for folks to wear down, and so it's there's a lot of different tactical operations that are deployed, on the constant. So if there's no other comments, thank you for sharing and getting us started on that note. So let me just open up the PowerPoint, And give me 1 second if folks would. And many of you may have already seen this, you know, so it's just you've heard about this, you've seen this before, but I think it's always for even for myself who've been kind of just, you know, just working on this for at least in this particular way over the last 10 years, it's always a reminder that how much is out there. And I think when we talk about surveillance, one of the things that we always look at is that how surveillance is always the tip of the policing knife. Surveillance has always been there. Surveillance has always been used to identify, to harass, to trace and track, and keeping an eye on suspect bodies. So in that also, over the years, who is that suspect body? Who is the enemy? Who has to be kept an eye on? We also look very clearly at what is the intellectual frameworks that are driving some of these things. And this is just an excerpt from Edward Banfield's book, who was then an advisor, and he was a professor emeritus at University of Chicago, was at Harvard, at UPenn, and was also an advisor to Nixon, Ford, and Reagan. And we also have to look at the time as well in the 60s and 70s. So here we have the war on gangs and the war on drugs and the war on crime. Immediately in the aftermath of the civil rights movement, at the late 60s, it got unleashed, and of course we saw the Black Panthers, various other liberation movements going on. COINTELPRO is very much the counterintelligence FBI programs. But here for the local, immediately how it sets up and race plays an immediate role is that the implication that lower class culture is pathological seems fully warranted, rather than waste time and public money implementing policies based on the false notion that all men were created equal. Better to just face facts and acknowledge the natural divisions that exist. And members of lower class should leave school in 9th grade to get a jump on a lifetime of manual labor. The minimum wage should be repealed to encourage employers to create more jobs for low value labor. And the state should give intensive birth control guidance to incompetent poor. And the police should feel free to crack down on young lower class men. So of course we see gang injunctions, that whole development of that. We see the development of weed and seed. We see, Operation Hammer. We see broken windows policing. So for the Stop LAPD Spying Coalition, our point of entry into surveillance is not rooted in the invasion of privacy, which is sort of a very limited scope, but how race and poverty and suspect bodies are basically just surveilled and traced and tracked, and how through the white gaze the system is set up as to who is the suspect body and who should be contained and controlled. And I'm going to run through this real sort of quickly, so because this is part 2 and we went through this last time in details, but our guiding principles, looking at it, that not a moment in time, but a continuation of history. It is critical that we put things in historic context and current realities and don't just look at them, but yet at the same time realize and be very aware that how tactically technologies are changing. So what additional tools and what are the different ways that we can be traced and tracked and monitored. There's always in the cultural setting, the creation of the other. And the analogy we always use is like how the other's faces have been paraded over the last 500 years to deem them as the enemy, as a hostile, as a suspect body, and how very meticulously through intellectual frameworks, through the media, through cultural settings, through legislative, laws and all of that, like how the face of the savage native has been paraded, how the face of the criminal black has been paraded, how the face of the illegal Latino, the face of the manipulative Asian, the face of the terrorist Muslim, the face of the deviant trans. So a lot of these things, but I think it also becomes an opportunity for organizing as well, because when we just kind of just take a pause, there's a whole lot of others that are there. So I think that's where a lot of power lies, that how are we? So I think for us in that vein, for the coalition, we reject the big tent organizing, because I don't have any time to sit down with a freaking racist or anything like, let's kumbaya and sit down and let's come together now, because we have a whole lot of our own others that we have to reach out to and organize and build power together. Of course, desensationalizing the rhetoric of national security. It's always like something is going on. The Russians are here, the anarchists are here, the communists are here. Now the anarchist extremists are here. This group is rebelling. The terrorists are here. So, you know, let's keep it down to a ground level because it's an everyday 24/7 rhetoric that we hear. And of course, the fight is in human rights. A quick snapshot of the history of policing, from lantern laws to up to predictive policing, which was dismantled. These were laws early 1700s that if you had to walk with a lantern, with a candle wick, if you were an enslaved person and they were walking without a master, slave patrols, black codes. And I think why these black codes issues really critical in slave patrols, because most of the origins of policing, particularly in the South and in the Midwest, comes out of slave patrols as well. And of course, in the West Side, you have the militias and other slave patrols too. But black codes become really critical because this is also an example of when we think of crime, that how crime has always been a racist social construct, that who has been deemed a criminal and what actions they have taken were deemed criminal in the eyes of people who are the powerful, who create these laws. So when we talk about immediately in the aftermath of emancipation and freeing of the slaves, that you had these black codes, like loitering became a law because now a body was needed to continue where you couldn't do slave labor. Of course, it was going on, but now you can legally incarcerate a person and get their bodies. So Jim Crow laws. Red squads are interesting because they basically started in the late 1800s, and they're very much rooted, and that was when people talk about FBI and NSA and DHS, the local law enforcement agencies were always the front line of surveillance and spying and infiltration. And the Red Squads came out in the aftermath of the Haymarket strike in 1886, which led to the creation of May Day. And that was a strike that, you know, just a lot of us are still sort of, you know, benefiting from that. That was a strike for the 8-hour workday, which led to some bombs going off during that strike and people being executed and hung. And then some of the earliest covert sections were created in local law enforcement agencies, and Chicago was one of the first ones, and then it came to LA. And the history of Red Squads in LA is interesting too, that in the 70s, what we found was that the LAPD by that time had changed its name to Public Disorder Intelligence Division from the Red Squads. But in the late 70s, we found out that they had files on 55,000 individuals, including about 2 million documents. Every city council member's office was bugged and infiltrated. Even Tom Bradley, when he was the mayor of LA, his office was bugged as well and was infiltrated. And in addition to that, the LAPD was gathering the information on Tom Bradley's meeting with the United Farm Workers around the Gallo wine strike and all of that, and then packaging that information and providing it to a group out of San Francisco called Western Gold Society, which is like a clan in suits, like the Conservative Council of Citizens or whatever that is in the South. So a lot of history there, a lot of stuff. I'm gonna, you know, just a lot of stuff sharing over there. This is real quickly intelligence-led policing. This has become now a new form of policing. This started out of England, out of the Kent Constabulary in UK, which the elements which are critical in this is behavioral surveillance and data mining. So now, you know, presumptive policing, preemptive policing, all of these things. Of course, driving while black has always been behavioral surveillance, so nothing new, but now how it's becoming a part and parcel. And what's interesting is that this is then starting the time about 20, 25 years ago, the veneer of science is starting to get used through CompStat model, which is computerized statistical models that Bill Bratton used in New York in the mid-90s, that what are people's behavior, what is the previous history, this, that, and the other, which then leads to what we then later on know as predictive policing and suspicious activity reporting. So a lot of this is real quickly what we know of the LAPD's architecture of surveillance. And what's important over here is that both human-based and technology-based surveillance is going on. iWatch is a See Something, Say Something program. Suspicious activity, this is the programs that basically were then deemed as your behavior as being presumptively criminal, where if you're taking photographs of an infrastructure, walking into offices of an infrastructure and asking about hours of operation, drawing diagrams, sitting out in the public, would be deemed as a suspicious activity. I mean, you would think that that's all protected. But what's interesting is that how that got defined. And I directly quote the definition of suspicious activity as observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning of a terrorist and or criminal activity. So when you break it down, that somebody behavior is being observed, which reasonably indicates, right, of pre-operational planning, that somebody is thinking of doing something wrong. So a secret file is opened, and then they're sent to these spy centers called fusion centers, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. And they're increasingly becoming critical as the federal government is moving into a lot of places too. But fusion centers are one of the key hubs of information gathering. And back in 2013 and 2014, we were able to mount some actions and shut them down temporarily while we were there. And the person that Nick just spoke about earlier, Brandon McQuaid, is also is based out of Maine in the East Coast, and started a whole campaign against fusion centers. So we'd love to talk about to our folks here in the community that how do we mount some actions around that. This is, again, as I was sharing the information, and some of the key moments in where we are in intelligence gathering are that the passage of the Intelligence Reform Terrorism Prevention Act, which ended up in creating an information sharing environment. And again, it's important to know it's really sort of a dry knowledge, but they play a role all day, 24/7 in our lives. So a little bit of history behind that is that after 9/11, a commission was established, and the commission came back with a report, and their primary focus was that the 9/11 happened as a result that people were not sharing information. There was no information sharing going on. It was more or less where every agency was kind of fighting on their own turf, and they were not sharing. So in a sense, they said that it's critical that we need to connect these dots, and information has to move seamlessly between various agencies. So local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, public and private agencies and institutions. So that's what led to this information sharing environment, and also passage of this law, which mandated the president to do that, which then also created and brought a whole lot of agencies under one umbrella as well. So in that, LAPD was one of the first organized police agencies to take this on. Basically, just by using binoculars, video camera, these are all suspicious activities that will put you into this list. And what's also important is that this is an old report from about 2013 from the Government Accountability Office, where by that time, over 14,200 local law enforcement agencies had already adopted this program. 53 federal agencies were participating. Out of the 800,000 estimated, almost 300,000 officers had been trained. Long Beach has its own history. There was a whole story about 5 years ago about a photographer and a journalist taking photographs of the old courthouse before that was refurbished. And they opened a suspicious activity report. Next thing you know, his name is put into Joint Terrorism Task Forces files and all of that. So a lot of history behind that. We were also able to get some through a public records request and a discovery that the ACLU had filed in a case of about 18,000 suspicious activity, copies of those reports. And these were some of the most absurd reports you will see. And I'll just share one of them, that there's a group of 4 students from an art school on the west side who are on a field trip for a photography field trip. And as they're taking their photographs, and they're on a school field trip, the sheriff pulls over, and then he starts questioning, takes their names, puts them into a suspicious activity report because they're using cameras. And next thing you know, their information goes to the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and now they have been their information has been uploaded into various databases as well. So a lot of this thing happening where it is a way of really criminalizing and how this information gets weaponized. And I think the other piece, going back to the previous circle that I mentioned, this one program, the iWatch program, that how that is being weaponized in LA, that when we forced the LAPD's Inspector General to do an audit, we found out that over 30% of the individuals listed in these secret files were identified as Black. So when you look at the population of the city of LA, and LAPD serves the city, it's 9.4%, and here you have 30% of individuals. And also where gender was identified as women, for gender-based, 50% of the individuals listed in that file were Black women. So, you know, the whole notion of how these things move and the impact and who's on the receiving end, all happening under the guise of national security and intelligence gathering. This is also something that the LAPD can do. In September 2012, the commission passed these, that they can place an informant and an organization for 6 months based just on a tip. There is no reasonable suspicion or anything. They can also have LAPD officers who can take on fictitious names and personas for online investigation and going into your Facebook. So sometimes if people are trying to friend us or friend you, you know, I mean, there's ways to, like, if it's suspicious, it could be a cop. I mean, like, you know, and again, I want to keep on saying that we're here to build power, not paranoia, but it's also a reality check as well as to, you know, how much do we know about these systems and what is our fight. So this is a digital receiver technology. People have heard about Stingray. This is the next level up. This is more or less like, it's called Stingray on steroids. It can also pick up your information and unencrypt the phones as well. It can also pick up information from phones and other devices if you've turned them off too. So a lot of times, you know, when we go to meetings, people put their phones away and this, that, and the other. It's really, you can turn it off or put it away, but it's really the whatever that, like a VIN number on a car, whatever those numbers are, it's through that that information gets picked up. This is what a Stingray looks like. And this basically fools the phones to send all the information over here by falsely creating or mimicking cell phone towers. So you would think that your information is going through your provider's cell phone towers, but they're basically being routed through Stingray. And these have been used quite a bit, a lot of times. So, you know, that also, this is Trapwire technology. This is like through infrared imaging at night. This is used quite a bit. And this box over here on the side is what in real time information is processed and sent to spy centers like fusion centers to be uploaded into databases. High definition cameras used quite a bit during Occupy. These are installed on helicopters, have very, very high resolution. I think about, I don't know, if 4-figure pixels and things like that, and can pick up things on the ground like a candy wrapper from a couple thousand feet. So pretty strong. This is a license plate reader. And of course, you know, we've seen them, we've heard of them. They've been used quite a bit by ICE as well in the whole deportation machinery. And of course, more recently, the news came out that Long Beach PD, and I would like for somebody from us to speak about that as well, from once we are done with this section real quickly, that they were picking up information from people's licenses and then going and confiscating cars. These are the drones. This is a Dragonfly X6 drone that the LAPD originally got, but then we fought them hard and the drones were grounded. And these particular 2 drones that had come from Seattle were ultimately destroyed. So that was one of our demands, and they destroyed them. Body cameras. Now, many people, unfortunately, have looked at body cameras as a reformist tool, and it is, that, you know, that it would monitor officer misconduct. But quite frankly, this is a tool for 24-hour surveillance. This is a tool has really heightened surveillance, and to the extent that now, and then maybe LAPD may use its own cloud services, which I don't think it does. It uses Microsoft and Azure cloud services, but a lot of police departments, millions and millions of hours of footage is going to Axon, which is formerly Taser, that was the largest manufacturer of body cameras. And what Axon has been doing, and it's all documented, they've been looking at the footage and trying to experiment that how now they can start predicting people's moves. So a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning being used in conjunction with this information. And we know in LA, when they announced the policy, all background footage can be used for evidence as well. This is another shot of Freedom on the Move. This is from a previous May Day march when we were out on the streets. We have a whole actual thing called Watch the Watchers. So there are 2 videos that have been uploaded on our website as well. So feel free to check out those videos as well. It's the same thing that what Don was talking about earlier, that being deployed in Long Beach, how it captured. This is just a snapshot of fusion centers that we were talking about. And then this is where a lot of hub and spoke system of information gathering. I think now there are about 85 of those in the country. One of the largest ones is in Norwalk, in East Los Angeles County. So a lot of times, a lot of these things are being uploaded. And what's interesting about that is that there was a whole US Senate report about the feasibility of intelligence gathering at fusion centers back in 2012. And they determined, and this is a US Senate subcommittee on Homeland Security, they determined that intelligence gathering at fusion center was irrelevant, duplicative, outdated, potential violation of Privacy Act protections. So, and it's just a whole boondoggle of a whole lot of money that has been going in. So I'm gonna stop there for a second and pause and see if up until now people have some questions. I know they have things in, let me just, okay. Okay, so I'm here in Portland, and a friend in Brooklyn both got no internet error when trying to register. Okay, well, I'm sorry. Hopefully they were able to get through. Does this group believe Signal remains one of the only secure methods to communicate? Is it an effective countermeasure? You know, I have my own issues about Signal. I mean, I don't think anything is secure, quite frankly, because the way things are done, and we're talking about it, but definitely much more secure line than regular phone. But maybe just I was gonna ask Leah to speak about smart city before we move on to the information sharing environment. But Leah, if you want to also comment about if you know anything about Signal as well.
I don't know that much about Signal, but one of my friends who does security in that domain basically said that because it's usually still attached to our phone numbers, it's not that secure. But if you set it up using like just the passcode system, it's a little more secure. But ultimately, because we're using our phone numbers that are tied to our other main accounts, that yeah, it's not completely secure by any means, because it's still traceable through the phone number. So yeah.
Oh, shucks, that's the last thing we thought we had.
But I mean,
no, I'm just joking. I'm joking.
More secure than using like, you know, Facebook or iPhone or whatever else. But yeah, and there are ways around it. I can actually share an article if we're going to do some post dissemination of security tactics, but it's definitely not perfect.
But maybe, as I think some comment is here, like versus other apps.
Yeah.
Is it still because of the encryption, and even WhatsApp as well?
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's better than others. So.
Okay. Cool. So you want to talk about smart cities?
Yeah, sure. And I won't go too heavy into it because smart cities are kind of. Can you hear me? Okay. By the way.
Yes.
Okay. Smart cities are kind of their whole own animal, but I think it's another important movement to keep watch of, and it's sort of cities are trying to use some of these data technologies that we learned about in surveillance and policing, but kind of at scale, at the scale of a city. And a lot like predictive policing, there's a lot of you know, hype and pseudoscience, but again, a lot like predictive policing, there's a lot of harm, and there's a lot of material on the ground consequences. And trying to reshape cities into the image of a smart city really, it rearranges our resources and rearranges our centers of power accordingly. But suffice it to say that the police departments, LAPD, but police departments in general are far from the only department that are using data-driven programs, data science, and surveillance technology to augment or automate service delivery. And I don't know how many people have heard about smart cities or even like the open data movement. But the entire kind of premise or promise of projects like data-driven, open data, smart cities is about making data digitized, standardized, and interoperable so it's shareable across city departments and functions. And that's within a city, never mind also within a state and other state agencies and things like that. And supposedly this is for the sake of like efficiency and transparency and accountability. But really it comes down to, it seems to be that the only way we know how to be smart is to increase monitoring and increase the creation of data with the ultimate hopes of sort of automating things that humans currently do. And so tech companies, private tech companies, many of the ones that also work with LAPD, like Palantir and Microsoft and Google, I mean, they know that cities are really resource constrained, and then, you know, very amenable to partnerships with tech companies, because that brings about resources, that brings about capital, that allows cities to update operations. And, you know, I said at the scale of a city, but it's not like there's this one master plan where there's like a team of people planning, you know, how to make, you know, the city better and smarter at scale. It's really kind of like these individual, department by department, initiative by initiative, team by team, private public partnerships, or I guess we could really call them like experiments. And that's how smartness really forms, which makes it really difficult to trace what kinds of technology development is being used in a given department. And you know, certainly we see with things like housing and homelessness, all the street sweeps, and we know there's a lot of departments that are working in concert with Los Angeles Police Department, or just police departments in general. But I guess what I want to stress is that it really has consequences for urban administration at large. It really changes what it means to do civil service of any kind in any department. So for those departments that are a little more well-funded, what that can mean is something like rolling out or experimenting with putting sensor networks in everyday infrastructure, like traffic or the metro, or smart streetlights, which we see a lot of buzz about in San Diego, but you know, we augmented the streetlights in LA too with audio equipment, something similar to ShotSpotter and other kinds of sensors to monitor certain neighborhoods. And that was a partnership with Philips, I believe. And then also, you know, aside from these sort of maybe more scarier sounding like sensor monitoring projects, there's other issues where like departments that are kind of more strapped for resources, it can mean that, like, you know, those that we, maybe social services that we want, it can mean that those operations are really altered and kind of get wrapped around producing digitized data, producing open data, producing more and more data dashboards to kind of justify that they're doing work, to justify that they need resources. And I think, again, housing and homelessness can be an initiative to look to as an example, because, you know, if you look on the mayor's website, you'll see a multitude of data dashboards. More and more data dashboards and visualizations are being produced. They have a whole central command office now in the Unified Homeless Response Center, and it's just like, you know, this sort of like electric tableau of all these different data visualizations. So dashboards are multiplying, but social resources aren't. And so it's kind of also about where resources go. But to bring it back to both surveillance, like the topic at hand, and I would say also abolition, I think it's important to get clear on, you know, which institutions and departments or operations are kind of being reimagined in the image of police, which is largely all of liberal governance, but, you know, how they sort of reimagined securing safety or accountability or delivery of social services through surveillance. And that's really a great number of our city services. And for people who want to learn a little bit more about that, there's a book called Automating Inequality by Virginia Eubanks that talks about social services and the ways those have been digitized and the consequences. And she did work with LA CAN, and a lot of it is LA focused. So that's something you can follow up more. But yeah, wrapping up, I guess, and again, bringing it back to surveillance and abolition, you know, there's sort of a need to go beyond defunding and even really beyond policing, because I think many arms of governance have kind of started operating in this way. It's all about kind of monitoring and auditing. And I think this kind of emphasis on digitizing data, opening data, making more data, and putting in sensors to monitor citizen behavior was something that was kind of justified in the post-2008 economic crash. Smartness used to mean kind of like sustainability, like how are we planning cities with population growth, and now it really means like being cost effective and doing more with less in terms of resources, because of course everybody but the police department's resources are kind of constantly being cut. And so I think it's important, like the similar thing is going to be happening in the wake of this pandemic. There's going to be more budget cuts to, again, everybody but police, unless we have a say in it. And I think we need to kind of pay attention to what gets excused by way of these sort of manufactured resource constraints, because somehow it always seems to be addressed with private technology or surveillance experiments. And I think Camden, which was brought up earlier, kind of makes this point exactly. Less police officers doesn't necessarily mean less harm, less state harm. The surveillance is happening in everyday interactions with city administration, with city infrastructure. It is sort of this relentless apparatus that Doug was kind of hinting at earlier. It's not just in these heightened moments of protest, but it's kind of built to be sort of a relentless smartness and surveillance. So yeah, I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Leah? Yeah, give me 1 second, Doug. So go ahead, unmute.
Thank you. I think something else too I wanted to like comment off of what you were saying was the fact that, I mean, another thing about LAPD spying and stuff is that's how they're able to actually to build cases upon people. And we're not talking about people that are actually guilty of something. You know what I mean? We're talking about somebody that, let's say that there's a leader of some type of movement that they don't like and they don't agree with politically. You know what I mean? Then at that point, they can monitor everything that they're doing and then pull them down. Now, and I think another thing that happens with this, you know what I mean, is like it's really easy to cast it off as, oh, well, this is conspiracy. With me, when I was thrown in prison unlawfully, I mean, there's no other, I mean, that's all the proof you need. I've seen how this really happens. Do you get what I mean? Like what happens is they'll throw a person inside of the incarceration system. And then once they're in there, they just strip away their voice, period. You know what I mean? So like and then they just bully the hell out of people. So for me, being able to see how inside the informants work, because when I was thrown in prison, that was the same time the Russian scandal was going out in Orange County. Sheriffs had to step down. It was literally the same time that was all occurring. So like being able to see how it worked inside of prison and then coming out here, you can see it's the same thing, just way more sophisticated.
Right on. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So there's some sort of, maybe I'll ask a question, Leah, that people's understanding, like I was asked about smart cities, that there are constant trackers as well. So, I mean, of course, when we think of license plate readers and when we think of other surveillance equipment, so are there like, in the smart city, there's just sort of tracking and movement of people? Is there such a thing, or there's such a technology?
I mean, there is, because again, a lot of the ways that we become smart is through, especially like video surveillance. But I think also what you were mentioning before in one of the slides, Hamid, about like behavioral, what do they call it? Like sentiment analysis, but behavioral surveillance, which also I think comes from like behavioral economics and that sort of legacy, which I think people can leverage like social media surveillance now. And for instance, there was a project at one point that was about like, I mean, it was really very similar to the Countering Violent Extremism program, but all of a sudden we realized that like there are other kinds of hate and that white supremacists exist too. And so there was a project there that was really about using social media to kind of counter and understand and detect whatever hate was at the time, which was loosely defined, but I wasn't involved in that project. So I would say like individual tracking, yeah, there's like, especially with like traffic control or things like that, cameras are very big, but I think social media is going to be the go-to for like individual behavior. And then again, with like social services or anything where you have to give your information in order to receive a service, that, as we know, with the sort of Stalker State graphic, that also is up at the individual level and feeds into the broader apparatus.
Thank you. Any other comments for Leah? So, so one of the comments was Don was talking about predictive policing and criminalizing to support a clearing out ahead of gentrification efforts, and absolutely. I mean, I think looking at the smart city development, and then in conjunction with how predictive policing, at least what we found out laid out, was creating these anchor points and how laser zones and all of that. Do you see a link between the development and gentrification in smart cities? Yeah.
Sorry, could you say that one more time?
Do you see the connection between smart cities and gentrification and development?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say like it's at full fruition yet, other than what we found. Sorry, there's sirens in my background, but other than what we found through things like predictive policing. But I think a lot of the piloting and testing of certain kinds of technology happens in like underserved neighborhoods, like for instance, the smart streetlights. And so a lot of the things that are being piloted and tested otherwise, I think have a lot to do with, gentrification and sort of like the economic lines. But I think also there's sort of like other ideals of the smart city that I think you see popping up that are more sort of like aesthetic ideals or modern ideals. And you start to see these new kinds of like, almost like micro cities or, you know, smart apartment buildings where it's kind of like appropriating the idea of like a commune and everything's kind of built in one. And there's just like kind of a surveillance apparatus encompassing that little kind of neighborhood or city or shared apartment setting, where I think that you'll start to see that kind of stuff at the scale of the city more, or it's sort of just these, I don't know what they would call them yet. I don't think they're called anything, but it's sort of the way a lot of land and like luxury apartments are being developed as sort of like contained micro cities, so that, you know, you don't have to deal with the messiness of you know, actual urban interaction. And then again, like I would say, like, you know, I think sanitation and other departments like that, where they're trying to use computer vision to automate some of the things that they're used to, that they're automate some of the services that they provide. Of course, like when you standardize data, you automate it, you categorize it, you're leaving out a lot of important information, and that's going to end up kind of penalizing people who have illegal dumping on their streets or something like that. But it's going to be a lot harder to contest, you know, an algorithm that's saying you illegally dumped something than it is, you know, if that was like so I think we'll see it as things start to get more sophisticated, but yeah, so.
Great, thank you. And then comment was made about LARCOP, which is the Los Angeles Regional Common Operational Picture Program. Definitely we know of that one, and I just want to share a quick report. So this was basically, and it's on our website, this is a report that we published immediately in the aftermath of Darrell Wilson's non-indictment with Michael Brown's murder. This is back in December of 2014 that we released this. And basically, just kind of what we did was that we went out and kind of monitored and documented the various types of staging that was going on. So, you know, stuff we started on November 24th, and there was a drone, and then we're getting more information. So we would go out and start documenting, taking photographs, a whole bunch of these things. So in a sense, like, you know, so how these communication vehicles, what kind of staging was going on, what sort of vehicle. This is a drone that had crashed as well, right around the neighborhood. This is just about, I would say, east of Lamert Park, in that neighborhood, where a lot of the staging, and there was a whole bunch of staging going off of where Buckingham and on the west side of Crenshaw Mall is as well. And here again, you know, DHS, military border patrol vehicles. So as people talk about Portland right now, this is back in November 2014. Where these things, and we had documented a lot of these things going on. Here again, Don, is the Freedom on the Move. So this has been very much a part and parcel so some of these things were also around in downtown Los Angeles on Beverly and Alvarado as well. And these are some of the other vehicles that are constantly, so in them, I've also noticed, like if you peek inside, and I think someone had taken, one of our crew had taken a photo as well of where stingrays were placed, and then they were being deployed and being used as well. So just wanted to quickly share that in documenting these things, that how critical it becomes. So I think what Don did, and I know that Amanda was talking about, like, being very cautious about what footage we have, so we're not sort of just putting our own people out in the line of harm. But I think as far as the equipment and other staging is concerned, absolutely, it's super helpful for all of us, to understand and to recognize, and also, like, the harm that is happening, and if there are follow-ups, because there's mass arrests and things like that. Some of those photos also showed that how successfully they were able to, and kettling has been one of the other, just tactics that they've been using in sort of like completely entrapment of people in these squares and blocks, and you're not going to be able to get anywhere. So that kettling happens, and we saw that happen this time on May 30th quite a bit, after we all left Pan Pacific, and then later on in the evening there were several, and people were even pulled out of their cars as well. So a lot of that whole process of stuff going on. So let me just get back to give me 1 second, please. Get to, okay. So getting back to the PowerPoint, where we ended, from current slide. Okay. So then what happens with a lot of this information? We talked about the LAPD's architectural surveillance. We talked about a particular style of how things go and where information goes. Now we're going to expand that a little bit more and start looking at that, how each one of those, and that's why we were talking about policing of the body, each one of these institutions and organizations, what is their information sharing look like and how it is gathered. So this was some, and we're in the process of updating some of this research as well. So this is some information that we did, and this is about 3 years ago or 4 years ago as well, as to when you go into DMV and when you deal with DMV, how many different ways your information goes in how many different directions. So, so in a sense, you go there to try to get your license or renew your license. You want to go get your to deal with your car, and then next thing you know, this overload is happening and it's being uploaded. This is NLETS, is the National Law Enforcement, some organization association as well. A lot of this information goes through NLETS, but then a lot of this information goes through this FACE, which is another agency, and how it moves. And again, it goes not just on a local level, but on a regional and a national and international level as well, how this information is shared. Here's an example of HUD, of Department of Urban Housing and Urban Development. So now when people talk about community, and here's community safety partnerships, I mean, we were mapping this out about 4 years ago, that how when we are looking at these reform programs, what exactly are they doing and who all have their fingers in it. So in a sense that this whole mega information sharing environment is being set up as a way that how it gets uploaded and how people get traced and tracked and monitored as a result of this information as well. Here's another thing about Department of Health and Human Services, about their information sharing. And this is something where, in a sense, and when you break it down, a lot of times we also found out that you're not even HIPAA protected, because whenever law enforcement gets involved, or under the guise of national security, a lot of those rights kind of just get thrown out the window as well. So in a sense, one of the things we always try to do is that when we talk about surveillance, a lot of times it gets limited to, like I said, law enforcement agencies or the FBI or Homeland Security, or the DOJ. But the point we are trying to make is, and this is then why it becomes really crucial at this political moment, that there's a lot of talk about divest, invest. And I think, and rightfully so, to defund the police departments and everything else. But I think we also need to be very cautious that how are we envisioning the investment part of it? Because what you have is, and today one of our members is breaking down the Department of Children and Family Services and Child Protective Services. These are all basically creating a carceral state. These are all policing of the body. So I think when we talk about invest, we also have to be very careful that what we are asking for doesn't get us into more sort of policing of our body and more criminalization. All of that information kind of leads into this, that this is the information sharing environment. This is how information moves within public sector and private sector and law enforcement agencies, and back and forth and back and forth. And think of this as not a static Venn diagram, but think of it as an intersecting multiple, just buckets of information gathering, and in a sense also trying to expose that each and every agency, each and every department, whether it's private sector, businesses, corporations, are a part and parcel of the national security police state. Very much part and parcel, whether it's Google or Walmart, because Walmart has its own cameras. When you go to Rite Aid, and there was this whole thing about the CVS pharmacies and people being kicked out outside of Vons and all of that. So a lot of them become a conduit for information sharing. And just even as the uprisings and rebellions were happening in LA, Michael Moore, who's the chief of LAPD, announced that they are going to be working in partnership with the FBI to assess the photos and the information they're going to be collecting through that information. So just want to again pause there for a second. A lot of stuff we are discussing, a lot of stuff that we are sharing. So just want to talk about, like, if people have any questions or comments, or how are people thinking now that we are talking about the Stalker State, that what does it mean to folks? Any comments? All right, go ahead, Don, you can unmute.
Oh my gosh. So I'm not a tech person. This stuff like turns on the inner geek in me. I don't know how these downloads are so valuable, Hamid. And so it's making me think of two things. One, I dropped a question around gentrification because Long Beach, like LA, is ongoing development and building happening. And North Long Beach is a key area that for the last 2 years, they've identified locations, and we can tell when the increases of police activity and surveillance and some of these tools that you talked about, like we see those things. And we knew from planning records at the same time that we saw the increase of the surveillance stuff and the sales, the relationships developing between the developers and the city were the exact same areas, right? Where they were targeting development sites. And so we were like, okay. Mm-hmm. Like, so just being mindful, not only mindful, but like being able to potentially disrupt the uses of these tools for the purpose of cleaning out an area, right? Criminalizing everyone in the area to get rid of as many people as they can. They did the same thing in the jungles in LA when USC was trying to get some property around, I forget what the name of the apartment building is, but the jungles is the name of the project there. Right. But one other point is, thank you for bringing up the invest part. You caught my attention with that because as we're redefining what community safety looks like and talking about creating these, what we've been calling like community health center, right? Which also like this health justice space, someone brought up like including that component. And I think that could help us to disrupt the attempt to use some of these mechanisms in the formation of this community partnership under the health department, because the health department is still the city, right? They'll try to use that to do their technology work to bring people into the system through that. And I think this is really helpful to help us be aware of that and to try to prevent as much as we can, right? And educate people along the way to prevent that from happening again, just as much as we can. It's really key because we're talking about taking away from these police departments mental health work with houseless people, gang-related intervention work. They have these youth units and things like that. So we want to make sure we put that work in the community. But of course, the cities are trying to figure out how to keep a stronghold on that work under the cities. And so this is just really helpful, like as we're in the middle of that process. So when cities come back and propose something, how are we tracking the technological pieces of that? How is it that they're those additional ways that they're trying to have their hands and like tentacles on people through those these mechanisms? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And did anybody want to make a comment about that whole Long Beach PD using license plate readers and now going after folks? There was the news out there. So do you know much about that, Dawn?
I mean, a little bit. I mean, Sheila can probably give more on this. I mean, we know of what we saw come out in the press recently where, they basically were tracking plates from that day. And here we are 2 months later, they're literally, have this list of plates, and when they see them, they're targeting them based on the surveillance that they did that day, and wrongfully so for some folks, just because they were parked near the pike when the pike, when folks were like doing whatever all they were doing around the pike, targeting them, saying you were near the pike when this happened, taking their car. And so if other folks are hearing about this, there's an attorney who we're working with, folks who are being retaliated against for having anything to do with or being around and wrongfully targeted, right? So let us know if you know of folks who have been in those situations too. But yeah, I don't know if Sheila might know more.
Sheila, you got more info?
No, not really. I mean, there was the article that came out, and I know that I've been hearing from people as well that they have experienced it, or that they know somebody else has experienced it, or they've been asked questions about it because their car was in this space. And just because they were there, some people just happened to live in that area, or they happened to be in that area. They weren't even actually a part of the protest, and they ended up being targeted as well. And I'm sure that the license plate reader that you were talking about was being utilized in that space. And I'm sure there was some other technology that was being, surveillance technology that was being utilized. I'd love to hear from you what other technologies you think were being utilized in that space that might have led to that. But it definitely is a case of it right here in Long Beach, which is why Long Beach CAT and BLM Long Beach wanted to be in this space to help uplift some of these issues.
Yeah, I think that simultaneously there's several different things being deployed, and I think we have to also look at body cameras as a primary source of surveillance as well, the footage that is constantly being picked up, drones, and then of course, LA and Long Beach area, then the larger Los Angeles, there were, and this was somebody from NBC, they had called the other day and talking about it, and they were able to pull up flight trackers during those days. And LA and Long Beach and greater Los Angeles had the highest density of helicopter and fixed wing airplane, small airplane traffic during the height of the rebellion and uprisings. And these are all sort of like patterns, horseshoe patterns, race course patterns, constantly going back, And I was looking at some of them around Long Beach and other areas as well, like the density of that. So in that, when you have high definition cameras, which we talked about earlier, how they pick up a whole lot of information as well. So you have body cameras, you have high definition cameras. You also have stingrays at play as well. You have other types of license plate trackers. So there's a whole lot of deployment of these things, and then freedom on the move that we actually saw as well. And then closed circuit television, CCTVs. that whole deployment as well. So you have a multi-layered sort of a surveillance state that is picking and gathering information as well. So yeah. Any other comment anybody else wants to talk about? There's a comment here that says Tom Modica, if I'm pronouncing his name right, Modica from Long Beach needs to go. He's been the face of corruption in Long Beach for a long time. The former Long Beach health lead is now Orange County Health. Again, corrupt. So, well, need to get rid of some of these people as well. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Stephen. Any other comment from anybody before we move forward? All right. Let me just open that. Okay. Somebody just says, we also just need to get rid of Orange County. I live there.
Amen.
Okay. All right. So let me just go back and oh, so this is something that also, Dawn, what you were talking about earlier is clearly an example of what you were saying about predictive policing. And this is the program PredPol, and what each one of these circle represents is like a 500 by 500 square foot map. So PredPol basically is an algorithm that claims that if it takes previous history of crime and current crime data, they can use this magic milkshaker that can spit out information that where crime is predicted to happen. And every 12 hours, they provide this 500 by 500 hotspot sheet. So what we did was we asked for 2 different time periods from July and December 2015 and July and December 2018 from the LAPD to get their public records of all the hotspots. And we looked at Central Division. So this is Skid Row. This is where we are based out of Gladys and 6th. So this is where you have a mass of our communities and people at levels of extreme poverty, homelessness, a lot of stuff going on. And this is all the downtown, and this is where the dirty divide is, North Los Angeles and Main Street, between extreme poverty and extreme affluence. But what was interesting for us also, we've been doing this work for a minute, that how these hotspots were not really showing up in Skid Row, although Skid Row by itself is a major hotspot. A lot of policing, broken windows, a lot of surveillance going on. But what was interesting was that a lot of these hotspots were where the new downtown is, where all the lofts are, the luxury apartments, the penthouse, and this is Los Angeles. So in a sense, what these policing technologies are doing is also quarantining the community as well. They're creating a quarantining effect, almost like a digital redlining, if you will, that how they are creating this thing. And in a sense, and because this would be designated as a hotspot, you will have more patrol over here. So exactly like it follows the history of gang injunctions as well, because in the 80s, when gang injunctions were first imposed and implemented, what was interesting about that was that those injunctions were not being implemented in neighborhoods where there was quote unquote a known gang activity. These gang injunctions were being placed in neighborhoods which were adjacent to these neighborhoods. So in a sense, trying to protect those neighborhoods from supposedly gang members from coming in, right? So this is the quarantining effect of if you are from Skid Row and you dare to cross Los Angeles Street, you're going to be thrown against the wall. You're probably going to get a ticket or arrested or kicked back into Skid Row as well. So that's this digital redlining. I just wanted to share that. Don, you had a comment?
Yeah, am I on mute? I don't know.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I want to do this for Long Beach, with all these new developments going up and the increase of houselessness and in the concentration of homelessness in certain areas because of the developments. But I would be curious if it would look like this downtown Long Beach. Who did this and can we do it for Long Beach? And and to your, you already said it, I was putting it in your chat. I think I put in the chat, they're kind of instead of just tracking quote unquote crime, right? They're tracking the affluence the affluent to basically create that container to separate them out, almost like like as a form of protection. It's easier to track them than it might be Skid Row.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in a minute, I'll look for that the laser zones chart as well, Don, because that also is that's from South Central Los Angeles. That how various neighborhoods and you know, when Grishario Mack was murdered in Crenshaw Mall is a laser zone. So that whole mall was designated as a potentially high threat area in the Crenshaw district. So I think in a sense, so what that does is sometimes when we talk about even legislations about the use of force and the escalation of use of force into necessary or less lethal, what is happening is that through the pseudoscience and this designation of high crime areas per se, what has happened is that it provides cover and immunity to law enforcement individuals where immediately lethal use of force is escalated. So because they are supposedly walking into a danger zone and a high threat area, so how these you know, communities get redesignated and how it happens also becomes really crucial as well. So going back to some of this stuff. So with the so again with the information sharing environment, and I just wanted to share, and I'll stop here in about 5 minutes. That you know, we have released a whole bunch of reports. This was our report is on the LAPD's suspicious activity reporting program, which we had asked folks to do some reading in as well. This was released in early 2013. We also released a report in late 2014 on the use of body cameras, which really is, and there's several studies that have happened as well. And one of the studies from Temple University also indicated a few years ago that police killings have gone up since they started using body cameras, because body cameras have become a justification for use of force more than anything else. And when we think about that, how the LAPD went through that whole transition, when we look at the report that was filed by the LA Police Commission on body cameras to the city council in advocating for body cameras, about out of the 50-page or so report, about 40 pages were spent on how can the department reduce liability? How can they reduce liability? This was a report that we published on the use of drones. And of course, like, you know, just they're there. This is a report on predictive policing and dismantling predictive policing. And really kind of just, it was a major fight. And I wanted to come to this slide, which is again, increasingly becoming more and more of an issue as well. And that's the social network analysis. That particularly how this is being used now in lieu of, so for example, LAPD announced that they're pulling out of the CalGang database, and they're not going to be doing any more gang databases. But in lieu of that, what is going to be happening? So now increasingly, this whole process of social network analysis is expanding, where one person becomes a conduit for 10 other people, and it kind of creates this metadata effect. That each person, because of their social networking, allows them to access information into, so the estimates are that one person can lead to about 10 to 50,000 people or 100,000 people, because you have to, maybe let's say 10 friends, each one of those 10 friends has 10 friends, each one of those, it's a multiplier metadata effect that is taking place. So I think this is also very critical. And I think that's why when we were having this earlier conversation about whether Signal offers that encryption or it is safe, I mean, quite frankly, it's everything is everywhere. So I think for us, when people talk to us about infiltration, our message is very simple in a sense, like, you know, I don't know how you can stop that, but you probably can't. So the thing is that to always be aware that it is present. Always be aware that, okay, you are here to take something from me. All right, then it's up to me that what am I going to give you, right? So I think that becomes really very critical in how we speak to our youth as well, as to, in a sense, because there have been Operation Crew Cut in New York. This is going on over here as well now with social network analysis. We're already hearing about license plate readers being used to go after police confiscating cars. But what they did was they were using and looking at social network analysis for people who were just sort of using language and supposedly threat to national security. And then they started bringing in racketeering charges against these youth as well. But what we also need to look at that was that was happening in housing projects in South Bronx and other areas as well, some of the most prime real estate that the developers have eyes on there as well. So always looking at gentrification development, real estate development as a way to how things are moving. So these are just some of our demands. And I'm gonna just stop here and just open it up to see if, and what I'll do is I'm gonna unmute everybody. And if you're not muted, and if you have background noises, just mute yourself, otherwise I'll mute you myself. So let's go ahead and open it up and see if people want to make any comment or any suggestions or be a part of this fight, because several things are needed. We need support. For example, in Long Beach, I know that Lorena and Sheila and some others are going to be leading a project that we're going to start filing a bunch of public records. So we want to do a whole training around that as well. But once we get those public records, you know, you need a lot of people to go through these documents. I mean, right now, we are going through the LAPD public records, and just one request, we have 6,000 documents. We recently filed a public records request in partnership with the National Lawyers Guild, and they around COVID policing. So LAPD comes back and they says, well, because we wanted all communications, they said, well, we have 62,000 emails. What do you want? So we had to break it down that what would be some of the relevant emails in that. So in a sense, you know, it helps us in building the story, and we've been able to fight back as a result of some of these public records requests as well. So I'll stop there and just open it up and see if folks have comments, and then what is our organizing and what is our pushback.
I think.
Toby, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Oh, I was just going to say, I think the pushback with this is actually to show that it's an actual tangible thing. You know what I mean? Because that's probably one of the biggest obstacles that you would face, is the fact that, you know, you can just pawn it off and just say it doesn't exist. But like from the little bit that I've been able to look into it, you know what I mean? This has been a prevalent issue for quite a while. And then it's military grade tactics that they're using on civilians. Like every person has their rights. You know what I mean? Like every person has their rights, but there's ways to bypass that. For instance, like that, I don't know the name of the list, but the list that they create and they put the people on there, like, watch this person, watch this person. Like, if you can't look at it, if there's no transparency into that list, it doesn't matter. Like, they can just throw whoever on there and be like, oh, this person's a bad person. Either he's a felon or he's a terrorist, and there goes all those rights. You know what I mean? And then at that point, you're infiltrating everything, and you're forcing another individual to be whatever, or you're just forcing another individual to either fall off the map or something of that sort.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, me being like, I've been out of the loop, but in it it's weird, you know, like just everything happens for a reason, man. But like, I'm definitely about this cause, bro, because it's been happening to me like fucking insane, like insanely.
Absolutely, absolutely. So then Leah had posted this link to Signals, so it's I just posted that for everyone. So if people want to just take that and maybe read it at their time. And then the question is that what technology do we have to search the PRS submissions? Are they submitted as a PDF? So in LAPD, they have created a technology-based portal. So what you do is, just as you were right, so what we do is that we basically develop a PDF, a document, and then submit that to the LAPD. And I'll show you a quick example while we are on that subject. Okay, so oops, sorry. There you go. Okay. So here's an example of us filing so this is what we filed last year in September on getting an update on the architectural surveillance. And basically what it looked like was that this is what we filed as a PDF document, and then uploaded that into a very detailed PDF document, and uploaded that into their inbox, and then basically just asking for all of this material. So this was filed in September. So a whole lot of things start showing up. I mean, like, you know, just some of the things that, for example, on drones, this is their contract on, for example, the digital receiver technology, the dirt boxes that we are talking about. So in a sense, for us, it also becomes crucial that when they start lying, well, this is about Esri, about what we were talking about earlier about GIS mapping. This is their contract on that. Let me just go into also, like, for example, this is all their contracts on Stingray. So it's redacted, and because the Harris Corporation doesn't want us to get a whole lot of proprietary information, this is their guidelines on the department internet use, and also their cyber surveillance and all of that. This is when you further, this is a very interesting, like I didn't even know that this, so LAPD is using bait cars to entrap people, and this is their documentation right there, like, you know, how they deploy these bait cars and how they place them out there, and it's really just entrapping people to steal these cars. This is on this is a bunch of the uniform crime reporting and everything else that MOUs. Just wanted to show something real quickly as well. This is, so now, for example, everybody's talking about community safety partnerships. This is their with the Housing Authority of Los Angeles, that how they're going to be. So this is where, when you look at this thing, that they're talking about community safety partnership, but here's where, you know, the CCTV is going to be there, and then they're going to bring in various other forms of license plate readers, this, that, and the other. Let's look at Palantir, because Palantir has been on a lot of people's minds as well. So these are all Palantir LAPD agreements and all of that. But here I just wanted to also bring in that
charger as like the Mac, or is it like our?
Okay, so this is where, okay, so we can hear people's own private conversations. So if you want to just put it up. So this is their memorandum of understanding. Between Palantir, and I just want to go back to just get to another thing as well. So here, when you look at this document, so this is like sort of like the what they call the master agreement and all of that. So this is already LA. So here's Long Beach. Long Beach Police Department is very much a part and parcel of data sharing between, you know, various using Palantir and various other pieces. Santa Monica Police Department and this, that, and the others. So just wanted to show that and share this with folks as well. So this is basically what we get, and we are still in the process of gathering a lot of this technology and a lot of this information as well. This is like today. This was a big thing was on Twitter. Forecasting gang violence. This is back in 2010 with Jeff Ranthingam, who's the co-creator of PredPol, and George Tita, who's a professor. So again, the academic complicity as a deep part of it. But in this also is very clearly that how they're working in this system as well. If you look at it, that some of their key areas and staging grounds are also, you know, just how are they getting into, like, for example, mapping spaces. So they want to get into public housing developments, right? They want to get into public housing developments. They want to go and map out the whole community. They want to just go and create all of these things. So this is an example of what we had filed as a public records request that goes into the portal, and then they start giving us information. And one of the projects that we have, hopefully, that right now we are in the process of developing a whole site, whatever that thing would be called on the website, as an archive uploading. So our plan is to upload all of these public records, everything that we get, videos, reports, public records, and make them public. because these are public records. So they can then benefit the community, and students can download it, lawyers can download it, researchers can download it, community can download it, and to develop a curriculum for people, because quite frankly, up until now in this piece, and it's been about, so it was Leah, myself, Peter, and some of the folks gave us some feedback in the community that we filed this public records request. No need for any lawyers. Do not get intimidated. This is a very straightforward, we don't need lawyers at all. The lawyers would come in if when they start messing with us, like, okay, is it time to file a public records lawsuit, right? Because for us, it's not, the whole issue about public records is really not about, like, you know, discovery, that we want to know that what did Palantir do? No, for us, it's about storytelling. So we want to have grant applications to find out what was the thinking behind, like, when they were developing this program, right? What was the envisioning behind the development of the program? We want to know who the funders are, what the grants are they getting, who has their fingers in it. Right? Then we want to know that what deliverables have they written in their grant applications, and what outcomes are they expecting out of that. So you know, I think that's the whole how we look at public records. So I'm going to invite folks to talk about it, and who are interested in being a part of a team to start filing public records in Long Beach, also supporting our work in LA, where we just to support the public records piece as well. But any thoughts, any comments? And if you're muted, I'll have to unmute you again. So I'll hit unmute all again. Anything, Lorena, Sheila, do you all have anything, any asks for as we are starting this public records protest?
No, I was just gonna say in Long Beach, it was kind of strange to file one because they wanted you to just do it through their portal and just like write a really quick message to them. But we like submitted it there and then also sent it to their like actual email as a PDF as well. But it was kind of interesting to look at the way they like want you to do it, and then to just follow your model instead.
Sorry, I'm still on the call. I was just saying that's why I'm not responding.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? Oh, no, Shannon, hang on, Shannon. Let me get to you, Shannon. So go ahead, Shannon. Unmute yourself.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hi. Thanks for having this this meeting. There's a lot of really scary and new information for people. So I'm in Portland. I just wanted to let you all know that at least like I said, I'm here in Portland, and a friend in Brooklyn. We both have this issue with trying to register. And even though I had other pages open in my browser, when we tried to use your bit.ly link, it said no internet. We both experienced that. So just thought you guys should know that, and that was really shady. Not on your part, but just that, yeah, this is such a necessary conversation, and thank you for having it.
Absolutely.
Really nice. Well, we recorded it and we're putting it out there, so.
Yay.
It's gonna go.
I'm gonna mute myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you. Then we have a comment from Gia that how can we join, and are there resources available to help guide us? Well, definitely, Gia, just what I would suggest is if you want to shoot us a quick email at stoplapdspying at gmail.com. I'm gonna just quickly just post that email address here, and then from there on, then we'll get rolling and see what your capacity is. And here's the email address, stoplapdspying at gmail.com. And then what's your best contact number? And then the whole the team's kind of just building right now in Long Beach as well around public records. And we definitely need a whole lot of help around that in LB. So please, whoever can help us would be much appreciated. And Dawn is laughing because I'm in that asking mode, and I'm going to just snag everybody in. So come on, everybody's is there. Oh, LB Cat at Proton Mail. Absolutely. Thank you, Leah. And that's our Long Beach Coalition for Abolition and Transformation. Thank you.
We have to
Go ahead, Sheila.
I can only share it to you.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Let me just send it over there. Sheila, you had a comment?
Oh no, I was just saying, yay, Long Beach cat.
Okay. Leah, do you mind hitting everyone and doing that, because somehow it doesn't let me copy and paste. So yeah. All right. Any other comments? Any other suggestions?
I think
Well,
the chat's restricted, right, Leah?
No, it's not.
Let's see. Oh, it's not
It
now.
is.
Okay. Let's see. It was restricted for me earlier, but let's see. Oh yeah, I can do it now. So anyways, that's the Long Beach Coalition for Abolition and Information. So if you want to do Long Beach-based stuff, you can get in touch with us there.
Shannon, do you still have a question? Let me just unmute you. Go ahead. Go ahead, unmute yourself.
Again, here in Portland, I've noticed that there are helicopters flying around that are completely blacked out. And I think the only reason you can see them faintly at all is because of like the light from the city, and they're flying really high up over like even residential areas, like outside of the protest zones over downtown, the Justice Center. And also there are like these crop like planes, like propeller planes that fly over. I live in the Northeast, which is basically on the border of Southeast and North Portland. Yeah, those also, I noticed last night they were flying like literally over my house in Northeast Portland. And they would like turn off, they wouldn't have any lights on, and then they would turn their lights back on at some point. And they just like fly in circular patterns all over Portland, like deep North Portland, just all over. And I'm wondering, are those surveillance, and are they sweeping our phones and laptops and computers for information? And has anybody, is there, well, I've read that that the planes that they're using are like illegal or unconstitutional because they're like military planes or something. But I'm wondering if other people are saying that they're experiencing this in other cities.
Yeah, it's all of the above. It's all of the above, and quite frankly, Shannon, I mean, we, at least the coalition, come from this understanding that the Constitution itself is a blueprint for oppression. So, you know, so in a sense, what is constitutional, what is not, depending who you are, where you live, what's your race, and what's your capacity to be represented as well. But you're right. No, fixed wing airplanes are very common. Small Cessnas. Actually, there's a company out of New York, out of the East Coast, that has been using, and we know there was a big story. It's been going on in Baltimore more recently as well, but there was a story in LA over Compton where a fixed wing airplane circled for 2 weeks, like about 12 hours every day, 6 days a week, flying over Compton and basically mapping out Compton for surveillance practices. And the sheriff's department knew, and the sheriffs were very much a part of that. The Compton's own mayor didn't even know about it, but they were mapping out Compton. So yeah, so in a sense,
Baltimore had a program as well.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Leah. Baltimore.
Baltimore had like surveillance planes. I think that was kind of piloted there. It has something to do with the Arnold Foundation too. I guess they're
right. Arnold Foundation. Arnold Foundation is a foundation which is a multi-billionaire husband and wife, and they've been funding a lot of electronic monitoring. So, and I think that's what I was going to go to for the next couple of minutes, if folks don't have any question right now, that we are also in a major COVID moment as well. And I think we also have to start thinking about that, and that's why we filed the public records for COVID policing. And we are also getting ready, we are working with some public health experts as well, and mapping out that how public health by itself is a major tool of the police state. Public health has always been a major tool of the police state. So as this whole surveillance apparatus is setting up, CDC got $500 million to set up a surveillance apparatus. Palantir got a huge contract for data processing. People who are being released who are in jail, who haven't even been convicted or anything yet. I mean, like, you know, they are being released with ankle monitors and electronic monitors as well. And then you have other pieces of contact tracing and syndromic surveillance and sentinel surveillance. So I think we also have to understand that how public health is so central to the Stalker State, and how public health is also becoming a primary tool of information gathering, and how that would further feed into the police state as well. So also we just need to really keep an eye out for that, that how these things are shifting. Wanted to share one other piece, a real quick tool for organizing. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we go there? Okay. So I wanted to, yeah, go ahead.
From Facebook.
Oh, okay. Wanted to share this. So this is something that we developed as a, oops, what did I do? Yeah. So this is what we've developed a tool for organizing called the algorithmic ecology. And this goes back to Predpol, Don, as you were talking about predictive policing. And what it does is that it basically, this is coming together, but what this, when we break it down and unpack it, it brings it back that what is the vested interest around a particular piece. So in a sense, based in Skid Row, we were looking at the impact on the community, that what sort of displacement is happening, digital redlining is happening, incarceration is happening, population control is happening. And then Charlie Africa was murdered in 2015, and that's when then we knew that Predpol was very much in operation. LAPD was very much using Predpol and predictive policing. So we decided, like, okay, let's file for public records over a period of time, and this is what the hotspots that I was talking about, to file for public record and see if where the spot that Charlie Africa was murdered is a hotspot. And to our surprise, he was not. So then we started looking at various things. That, okay, Predpol came out of the military for predictive policing, for predicting insurgencies. The academy was deeply involved in this. So UCLA is a professor of anthropology, Jeff Brantingham, who co-created it. UCI, George Tita, we talked about that as well. USC is deep into these things. Then we looked at the funding from the federal government. So DOD had originally funded this whole research about predicting insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan. Then the National Institute of Justice and Bureau of Justice Assistance and DOJ got involved, and they started funding this work. So we knew that the federal government is deep in that. Then private interests, that how Predpol formed its own company as well, and how the developers, of course, for development of Los Angeles and downtown Los Angeles, they had their fingers in there. And of course, they fund a whole lot of political campaigns. So the local government, from the mayor down to, and we are just now Jose Bizarre, Englander, we constantly, you are hearing these news about city council members for taking bribes from developers and going to jail. Englander just went to, he was the head of the public safety. So
actually, we will consent to your.
Okay, never mind. And then, so this is where also we look at that, how are the nonprofits involved in that too? And we found out that one of the police commissioners, Sandra Figueroa Villa, had taken $7,500 from Predpol while she's still on the police commission, as Predpol was expanding in all 21 divisions. And what we found out was that Sandra Figueroa Villa took this money on the behest of the mayor. So just wanted to share this tool, if you will, that, and then for us, it's been really helping us do power mapping. And then also when you do your SWOT analysis of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or even when we start looking at understanding the ecology around that surrounds various issues. So for us, what we did was, in essence, just decentered Predpol, and we were successful in going after the academy as well, where we had over 450 faculty and graduate students from all around the country and the world sign a letter against Jeff Brantingham, one of their peers, the ethics and merits of his research. So which definitely helped in bringing down predictive policing and dismantling it in Los Angeles as well. And then putting them, so now Sandra Figueroa has been absent, has not been at the police commission meeting, putting the city, publicly shaming the city as well, and understanding and recognizing as to how deep these things run. So I just wanted to kind of just share that real quickly as well, and see if people have any thoughts about, like, as we are, and there's a whole Medium post on a breakdown, a written breakdown as for the use of this tool as an abolitionist tool for organizing. So with that, it's almost 8 o'clock. We're going to wrap this up in a minute. Just wanted to see if folks have any closing comments, any thoughts, anything, if this was helpful, this was beneficial, was this a good learning, good knowledge exchange. The goal is to decolonize knowledge. So any comments, any thoughts about any of this? Silence. Yeah, go ahead, Douglas.
I'll just say that, like, well, since I was released from prison and then came to the streets here, like Los Angeles, Skid Row, like, you can really see that everything does connect, man. You know what I mean? Like, being able to see how it's all some greedy corporate agenda just to enslave the people and run this place like a to be honest, just like a sadistic person's playground. You know what I mean? Like, it's really crazy to actually see that and experience it firsthand, like how I have. Like, when I first came out here, bro, I thought like I was gonna be received like with open arms. I ain't never been here, you know what I mean? I'm a cool person. I just walked out of prison. I've been through hell, and then it turned well, like, it's been intense. So this work is definitely appreciated, man.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And it takes a whole lot of people involved. So I just happen to be here presenting on behalf of. Any other comments? All right, well, good. Well, hopefully this was helpful. So folks, please join the fight. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And of course, I think for us, that's why we are vehemently against any ordinances or any legislations to be passed which will legitimize surveillance. That's why you've seen us come out publicly against the ACLU whenever they're talking about moving some surveillance ordinance so that they don't legitimize that. It's all about people power, because when we get into legislations and other things, then all that information stays on a 30,000 foot level. And then, as somebody said in this comment, one of the last comments, that the vision of the panopticon is coming to reality. And yes, it is there, but the panopticon will be taken down. It is being taken down, and it's being exposed, and it's all about building people power and organizing, and we will abolish it. We will dismantle it. So with that, I want to thank you. I really appreciate very much everybody's participation, everybody's showing up, and it's just been a pleasure. So be safe and be healthy, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Next Tuesday here at 6 o'clock is our Tuesday webinar from 6 to 8, and that's going to be on police state, gender, and sexuality. We will have a group out of Bogota, Colombia, that's going to be joining us, a group of trans women in Colombia who are organizing and do street theater to organize against state violence and police oppression. So please join us next Tuesday. That's going to be out, all the information is going to be there, and we look forward to seeing you. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Hamid.
Thank you.